instinctive change around my neighbourhood. So I think there's something going on at both ends of that spectrum.
Tell us about some of the birds in Zealandia. Have you noticed, what have you noticed in particular with the younger birds?
Well, definitely the rangers that are heading into the sanctuary for essential work are noticing that young birds are particularly curious. So, they're not seeing a lot of people, so the rangers are quite unique, a bit of a novelty. So the korimako or bellbird, the robins, the tutawa are coming in and checking them out a lot more at the moment.
Is it easier for birds to breed and survive in times like this when they're not competing for sound and space by us, or what?
Yeah, this time of year, they're not breeding anymore, so they've finished up their season. But the noise is a major influence. If you think about a bird, their main mode of communication is in their song, of course. So if they can't be heard by another bird because of noise or traffic or people passing by, that's a huge influence on their day-to-day.
So finally, Daniel, it is something that many of us will not want to leave behind when, we resume normal activity. Traffic starts up. We'll want to somehow keep that bird song alive. How do you reckon we could do it?
Look, there's plenty we can do. I think one of the main things, of course, is keeping a trap in your backyard if you can, planting native plants, but also starting to look at ways that might keep your pet closer to home. Keep your cat home for a cuddle as much as you can. All of those things really contribute to making sure that bird life can survive and thrive. Okay,
Dr. Danielle Shanahan, Director of Zealandia there. Thank you very much for being with us. Sally Wenley, have you noticed this at all in and around your area, or indeed?
I have.
Yeah.
I have, yes. We've got a noisy one-way road, and without the traffic, the bird song is fabulous. We even have magpies, and we have tui, and I've got a kingfisher bird that sits up there now, and I think because of the lack of traffic, there's a lot more of them on the power lines. We've still got the old power lines, and we've got, I'm looking out the back now, I've got doves, sparrows, I've got a pretend kiruru on the wall, that's not right. But I think there is more, but then again, as she alluded to, maybe it is the lack of traffic noise that's leading to that as well.
Yes, Lucy says, Glen Innes, Point England, Glen Innes, Wallace, we are enjoying the nightly visit of Moorpork. We haven't found him yet, but the sound brings great joy in our hood. And that's so true, isn't it, Shane? It's that waking up of that sort of, that lovely cacophony that maybe we didn't notice before, or what?
Yeah, we have tui come and visit us, and I haven't seen them around before. Maybe I just didn't notice, but every day I go for a walk in Cornwall Park, social distancing, and I've noticed the huge growth in the bird life. Ruru, which is a moorpork visiting during the night, is okay, but it's bad luck if it visits you during the day.
Oh,
it's the messenger of death. There you go.
Ah, right.
And what about fantail coming inside?
So they say. Yeah, but certainly the ruru, because you don't see them around as much as you do fantail. But there you go.
Well, very interesting stuff. And Sally Wenley, Shane Tepo, you've been wonderful with me this afternoon, and thank you very much for your company. I'm Wallace Chapman, and I'll see you for Friday's show. We have Ian Grant and Michelle Bogue on tomorrow for Friday. See you then. Checkpoint next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei. What will Alert Level 3 lockdown light look like? Bricks and mortar retail shops, cafes and restaurants will stay closed. It's takeaways and online shopping only. School attendance will be voluntary and only open for up to year 10. 10's also the maximum number of guests for weddings and funerals at Level 3, but you'll still need to keep the bubble tight. Minister Stuart Nash joins us live with more details. We visit a new virtual supermarket staffed by former travel managers and bar workers. And tonight we'll tell you what a Julian code is and what it's got to do with this can of chili beans. Don't forget, you can watch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. Thousands of businesses can start to trade again under Level 3, but still with no face-to-face contact. The government has this afternoon announced the rules in the event the country moves to Level 3. The Cabinet will decide on Monday whether to come down from Level 4. Under the new rules, industries such as forestry, construction, furniture removals and trades can start up again. Resumption will depend on meeting strict distancing and hygiene rules. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says retailers and hospitality businesses can operate under Level 3, but only where it can be done without contact.
Public-facing bars, restaurants and cafes remain closed, and so do malls and retail stores. But, unlike Level 4, food delivery, drive-through, online shopping, or options like click and collect shopping can begin.
Jacinda Ardern says it's important for the economy not to move to Level 3 too early and risk having to go back into full lockdown. The country's had the lowest number of positive COVID-19 cases since lockdown. The Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, has announced 15 new cases today, the lowest since March the 22nd, 4 days before Level 4 began. He says investigation teams have been working to find out where new cases were transmitted. The results indicate a low rate of community transmission since Level 4 began.
4 of the cases have now been classed as community acquired, and just 1 case is still under investigation, and that is actually a case from yesterday.
Ashley Bloomfield, the official death toll remains unchanged at 9. Dr Bloomfield says people should use their judgment on whether to expand their bubble to include people over 70. While people will still not be able to freely socialise under Level 3, bubbles can be expanded slightly. He says the elderly can be included in bubbles in a way that protects them, such as through good hygiene and physical distancing.
This is one, I think, where people need to really use their judgment, because we do know that that group is at risk, but we also know that that is a group that is at risk from loneliness and from and these are things that are very important.
Ashley Bloomfield says if you have children, it would be best not to send them to school if you're widening your bubble to include a person older than 70. People will be able to swim and surf, but other riskier activities will still be banned if New Zealand moves to Alert Level 3 next week. Restrictions on socialising and travelling may be loosened slightly, but Jacinda Ardern says life will still feel much like it does now. She says as long as people are by themselves or in their bubble, more activities will be allowed under Level 3.
You can swim, you can surf, you can fish from the shore. However, I do want to add a word of caution here. Now is not the time to take up a new activity that you have never done before. It is too risky.
Jacinda Ardern says if there's any sign people are starting to congregate, the rules will be reviewed. Principals are warning the plan to partially open schools will be complicated. The government says schools and early childhood centres will reopen on a voluntary basis for students up to Year 10 under Alert Level 3. The president of the Auckland Secondary Principals Association, Richard Dykes, says it will be hard for teachers to work with some students in the classroom and others online.
It's going to be really complicated because I will struggle to ask my staff to teach potentially two lots of lessons, one to the students in the class and a second to the students outside. It's not as simple as saying, look, there's one set of resources, you just attach to it.
Richard Dykes. Construction contractors expect to be ready to meet strict Level 3 health and safety measures when the lockdown lifts, putting about 300,000 people back to work. Industry representatives have been working on health and safety protocols for weeks, which contractors will need to meet before staff can return. The Master Builders Association, which represents contractors on large-scale commercial developments, such as office buildings as well as residential housing, employs about 250,000 people. The civil contractors industry body, whose members are mostly involved in big infrastructure projects, estimates another 40,000 workers will be able to return to work soon after the lockdown lifts. It's coming up to 5:04 In sport this afternoon, New Zealand Rugby and the New Zealand Rugby Players Association say they're confident they've reached a pay agreement which is fair for all parties. After several weeks of negotiations, the organisation confirmed this afternoon the country's top players will miss out on a combined $25 million if no more matches are possible this year because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Players who receive a base salary of less than $50,000 won't lose any of that money, but those on more will have up to 30% of their salaries frozen. The union's head of professional rugby, Chris Lendrum, says fairness and a complex player payment system meant negotiations needed to be thorough.
There's a number of different buckets, I suppose, players can potentially qualify for, and just getting the balance of how we reduced all of those different buckets was really important to us, because equity and fairness is hugely important.
Chris Landrum of New Zealand Rugby. And that's the news.
A public health expert sounds alarm bells about coming out of lockdown early.
We've seen cases occur in settlements on the West Coast, for instance, that didn't seem to have an origin. So we really need that fine-grained data.
And you haven't seen that data either?
The West Coast wants to be the first out of lockdown, but some aren't sure.
At the moment, there's just a lot of people sort of, hoping that the light at the end of the tunnel wasn't a train coming.
And as if that's not alarming enough, what about 6-metre waves pummelling Wellington's south coast yesterday?
Freak wave came over the top, which wiped out all the handrailing on the bridge. She got swept under, had a big drink of seawater and managed to get herself out okay.
Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Another short forecast taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Friday. And for Northland to Horowhenua, including Coromandel and the Central High Country, showers becoming isolated this evening, though rain tomorrow possibly heavy and thundery. For the rest of the North Island, fine apart from isolated showers for the rest of today, scattered rain tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine with high cloud at times, scattered rain tomorrow, mainly about the ranges and sounds. Canterbury fine today, a few spots of rain possible tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, a few showers. Rain tomorrow, heavy falls are possible, then easing to isolated showers. Otago and Southland, mainly fine, but a few showers about the south coast until evening. Early rain tomorrow, then a few showers, mainly about the coast. Chatham Islands, occasional showers. It's nearly 7 minutes past 5 on RNZ National.
Thanks, Paul. Kia ora and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. It'll be a return to early childhood centres and school, but only for some. Bars, restaurants and cafes will remain closed, along with gyms, museums and movie theatres. Takeaways and drive-thrus will be open, and you need to stay in your bubble, but perhaps with some limited contact with other close family members. The Prime Minister has today given us a first glimpse of what life might be like in Alert Level 3, or what she described as a recovery room. Cabinet ministers will decide on Monday whether to drop from COVID-19 Alert Level 4 down to Level 3 from next Thursday. But be warned, things won't be back to normal for some time yet. In a few minutes, Government spokesperson Minister Stuart Nash will answer your questions about Alert Level 3. But first, here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The first look at life after lockdown. The Prime Minister today spelling out what comes when New Zealand drops out of Alert Level 4 and into Level 3.
This is where we hold, we see if we're really well and whether or not we can keep moving.
Jacinda Ardern calls it the recovery room, as New Zealand waits to see whether the tough restrictions have worked before dropping them altogether.
If we deteriorate, then it's back to lockdown at Level 4.
And New Zealanders don't want that. In many ways, then, Level 3 is lockdown light. Kiwis are still asked to stay at home as much as possible, not to travel outside their region, and to limit their contact with others. You can expand your bubble to reconnect with family or bring in caregivers, but under strict conditions.
Keep it exclusive though, keep it small.
And as long as you stay in that bubble, some low-risk recreation is allowed. No boats, no jet skis, no playgrounds. But surfboards are okay.
You can swim, you can surf, you can fish from the shore.
The looser rules come with a warning. Any sign of congregation and such activities will be banned once more.
So please, do not rush to places where others may congregate as well, and treat it as a reunion with your long-lost swimming buddies.
Weddings and funerals will be back on, but with no more than 10 people in attendance and no food or drinks served. Alert Level 3 also means opening up the economy, and that means letting people back to work. An estimated 500,000 more. Those who've been working from home must continue as they are, but those who've been unable, think construction, forestry or manufacturing, can restart. Only if they can do so safely.
We expect, just as we have for those who are already operating, that businesses will put in place hygiene, cleaning regimes and social distancing within their workplaces.
All public-facing businesses will remain closed. That's cafes, bars and restaurants. They will be allowed to offer takeaways, just with no face-to-face contact. Malls and retail stores stay shut to the public too. Online shopping is fine.
The key principle here is simple. You cannot engage in face-to-face transactions. So use your phone, use your computer, use your car, or use an app.
With many parents suddenly having to return to work, schools will also reopen for students up to Year 10. Attendance will be voluntary, and parents are encouraged to keep their children home if they can. It all adds up to a New Zealand still far from normality. Indeed, the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says while the rules will relax, the public mustn't.
We're over the peak in level 4, but not out of the woods. We will still be not out of the woods in level 3, and if anything, we need to be even more vigilant because everybody will have potentially more contact with others.
We have the opportunity to do something no other country has achieved, elimination of the virus, but it will continue to need a team of 5 million behind it.
5 million New Zealanders. They learnt today what Alert Level 3 looks like. They'll have to wait till next week to learn when it kicks in. Cabinet ministers will decide on Monday whether to lift the lockdown just 48 hours later. For Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Businesses operating under Alert Level 3 will be able to stretch their legs somewhat, provided social distancing and health and safety measures are in place. The Prime Minister has stressed face-to-face contact, unless with your bubble, should still be avoided. For companies with well-oiled online shopping and delivery networks, it's good news, but for others it's going to be tougher. Forestry and construction has also been given the green light if and when the step-down happens. But while it's a semblance of normality, Level 3 will be far from business as usual. Emma Hatton reports.
News of what life under Alert Level 3 might look like provides some comfort to retailers who, since late March, have had no choice but to shut up shop. And while the changes won't see a heaving Lambton Quay or Queen Street by any stretch, behind the scenes, the wheels can begin to turn again. The Managing Director of the Hallensteins Glassons Group, Mary Devine, says being able to offer all products online, as well as trialling click and collect at certain stores, will be a welcome reality.
I know the customers will be delighted because a lot of the comments that we've been getting, through our different social channels is, they're certainly hungry for new products. So that's a real positive. Obviously, being able to offer the full product online, we are really excited about.
But for others without sophisticated e-commerce sites, Level 3 could look quite similar to Level 4. Retail NZ's Chief Executive Greg Harford says about 3/4 of retailers have some sort of digital presence set up and ready to go, but for others it's not that simple.
The big challenge is going to be for that remaining quarter of retailers who perhaps haven't been digitally enabled in the past. And a lot of those businesses that don't have an online presence might, for example, include cafes and takeaway bars. So a number of those businesses will be thinking about what they can do to try and generate some cash flow during the coming Level 3 period.
He says the restrictions, while certainly more welcome than those currently in place, are still too tight in some areas.
There's a number of businesses which could operate safely on a one-in, one-out basis in the same way as a local dairy might, which can't continue to operate under the new Level 3 restrictions. So that's a little bit disappointing. And there are certainly situations where it would be really valuable to have some of those businesses up and running, a sort of a specialty grocer, for example. So there's a range of those sorts of situations that we'll still be looking to pick up with government.
And while retailers try and figure out how they can operate when the country moves to Level 3, the hospitality sector, which relies on face-to-face customer service in bars and restaurants, may have more difficulty. Drive-through will be allowed, as well as other contactless services like home delivery or click and collect. But Christchurch businessman Anthony Goff, who developed the city's multi-million-dollar terrace hospitality precinct, says his tenants won't be doing that.
Uber Eats takes 30% of your margin or your costs, and that's an overseas company, so we're just feeding somebody overseas. Restaurants would normally make about 10% of the sale price of the product. So if they don't do Uber Eats, they'll lose 20% on every sale they make.
He also blasted the government for not doing enough to support commercial tenants.
We were also expecting a commercial package, rent help for commercial tenants, in a similar vein to the wage subsidy. However, what they've come out with a commercial package, which is absolutely useless, really, for assisting cash crisis for a restaurant.
And it's not just consumer goods being given room to breathe. The forestry sector, which has been hit badly by the pandemic, is also planning how it might gear up. The chief executive of the forestry company PF Olsen Te Kapunga Jews says capacity fell 40% between January and the start of the level 4 lockdown as many contractors lost their jobs. But he says they've been planning for the last 2 weeks how to get the remaining workforce back into action once level 3 is reached.
Things like reducing the number of people and being transport, so increasing the number of vehicles that would go to a work site, perhaps making available the standards, the hand sanitisers, the washing of hands, working in a little more isolation.
The president of the Forest Owners Association, Phil Taylor, says workers are ready to start immediately.
We will start mobilising all our resources, our contractor workforce, our cartage contractors, stevedores, marshalling companies, opening up the supply chain. So, we should be able to get operating pretty quickly, within 24 hours, I would imagine.
And the construction industry is also looking forward to getting back to business. Infracom Chair Alan Bollard says a return to work on infrastructure will be an important part of New Zealand's economic revitalisation.
That's important because it's a big industry, it's got a big employment, and it's just stopped dead. And the longer that lockdown goes on like that, the more damage there'll be. So we expect to see quite a bit of activity getting into these sites pretty soon.
The rules for Level 3 have been outlined to give businesses a chance to prepare for if and when the announcement comes. The Prime Minister described it as cautiously opening the economy, but maintained the best economic policy was still to defeat the virus, which means movement will still be heavily restricted. The initial 4-week lockdown period ends on Wednesday night. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
Stuart Nash will be joining us shortly to answer your questions on Level 3. So if you've got any, send them in really quickly, 2101 on the text, or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Under lockdown Level 4, New Zealand's glamorous shopping strips have become ghost towns, and there are fears they might never be the same again. Expensive rents and a sales downturn meant the retail sector was already struggling. The coronavirus has only compounded that, and there's no end in sight under the just announced Level 3 rules. Stores will only be able to open for delivery and contactless pickup. Lydia Batham reports.
It's an eerie feeling walking along Ponsonby Road. The normally vibrant and bustling upmarket strips empty, and police signs cover various storefronts. It's a hard sight for Luke Dallow from Ponsonby's Chapel Bar, who says many will likely remain vacant well after the lockdown ends.
I think when we get out of COVID and down to level 1 or over COVID completely, even down to level 2, there are going to be some cafes and restaurants that will not open. They just can't afford it. They will not be able to open. They've probably already got struggling balance sheets at the moment, and we won't see them open, unfortunately.
He says filling those stores will only become harder now with the heavy economic impacts of COVID-19. And unless rents are slashed along Ponsonby Road to match the financial hit suffered by businesses, other shop owners will also decide against renewing their leases.
For commercial real estate, also, it's going to be very expensive, and I think the commercial real estate owners need to say, I'd rather have someone in my building and pay less than being empty and making me no money.
Dame Denise Lestrange-Corbet from World, which has boutiques in both Ponsonby and Newmarket, agrees. She says many retailers will likely start moving away from bricks and mortar towards a world of online sales, where landlords don't have the power to sink a company.
A lot of brands are going to restructure and look at how they retail and whether they do need bricks and mortar shops to trade or whether they go completely online. If you can't afford to keep paying the rentals and the landlords are not going to come to the party, then you want your business still to survive, and if it has to survive another way, then that's all you can do.
The chief executive of the Newmarket Business Association, Mark Knopf-Thomas, says some of the police signs along Broadway were there before COVID-19 struck, with shops moving into the newly built mall.
Some of the brands who came out of Westfield had gone back in, and they had taken up premises along Broadway and some of our side streets. And some other brands who weren't in Westfield have also gone in, which is what we had expected. Leasing actually had been going really well pre-COVID-19. And some of our key sites along Broadway have been leased and were being fitted out, and some others are due to be fitted out once we get back to some kind of normality.
He says the businesses most likely to survive are the ones who'd already embraced online sales.
Our retailers who have embraced omni-channel retail in the sense that their digital, their social, their website, the bricks and mortar, the experience where they push themselves out to their customers, they are the ones who are probably going to rebound very quickly. Those retailers in bricks and mortar who haven't necessarily had much of an omni-channel footprint from their own brand, they, I think, are going to have some very rough times ahead.
The look and feel of our main shopping centres is likely to feel different for a long time to come. And much like how we're adjusting to virtual meetings and digital learning, a trip to the shops might consist of opening different tabs in your browser. For Checkpoint, Lydia Batham.
It's 21 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The government spokesperson today is Minister Stuart Nash and he joins me now. Good evening, Minister. How big are the gains, do you think, in terms of freedom from going from level 4 to level 3? Because some people will look at this and think it doesn't look that different.
Well, what we reckon is there's about 500,000 Kiwis working at the moment. This will take it up to about 1 million. We've also moved, as the Prime Minister eloquently said, from a business being essential to being safe.
Okay,
so quite substantial.
So let's look at some of the details because people have a lot of questions. What's the status of the bubble under level 3? Can you invite other people into it and who?
Yeah, sure. What we're basically saying is we still want to keep contact as minimal as possible. So, you're allowed to invite family or a caregiver, and that's about it. If people think they're going to go back to pre-COVID levels where they're having beers with their mates, they're not. That is a way off.
So what if you've got 10 brothers and sisters? Is that close whānau?
Well, 10 brothers, depending on where they live and how old they are, et cetera, et cetera. But no, I would say it's your parents. For me, it's my 2 older children who I haven't seen apart from over the fence or on FaceTime. But keeping in mind, Kiwis have done really, really well to keep COVID down to where it's at the moment. The game is elimination, and we're still chasing that incredibly hard. So we're asking people to use their common sense. Of that, there's no doubt. But let's not undo all the really hard work we've done by being silly buggers and breaching this.
So, okay, if you are introducing those new people into your bubble, what do? Can you hug them? Can you shake their hands? Can you give them a kiss?
Well, if it's your mother, you can probably give her a hug. If it's your son or your daughter, you can probably give them a hug as well. But again, we want to reduce human contact, as much as we possibly can, whilst also acknowledging that for a lot of old people, my mother's been in isolation and locked down like everyone else. I haven't been near her. I've been calling her and keeping in touch. But for a lot of our elderly people, human contact is really important.
So no dinner parties really, and no having the mates round for a few beers and some snacks then. That's still a no under level 3. Right.
It's still a no.
How will schools work practically? Because you have a potential situation where teachers are going to have to teach students virtually and then they're going to have some kids in the classroom. How is that going to work?
Yeah, well, teachers are going to have to work out the best way to make it work, to be honest. They're going to try and engage in social distancing in the classroom, so you're not going to get classes of 30 kids all sitting beside each other like, we did.
How many will the max be then?
Well, that'll be up to the school and the classroom to determine. But what we have said, and, we understand the practical reality of a whole lot of third and fourth formers in the classroom, right? But what we have said is we don't want to undo all the really good work we've done so far. If you can't keep your kids at home because you've got to go out and work, then we are saying send your kid to school. But if you can work from home, we're asking that you do work from home. And if you can keep your children homeschooled just until we get over this, then that's what we're asking people to do.
So essentially, the schools are being used as childcare facilities and babysitting?
No, not at all, because what we are expecting at the moment is for children to still be learning when they're at home, and they will certainly be learning when they're at school. So the last thing we need is for young men and women and children to be missing out on education. It's the reason why Chris Hipkins has introduced all these measures around education. It is not a babysitting service. This is not a holiday for kids. we do expect them to be learning, and they certainly will be when they go back to school.
But the ones going back to school are, in essence, being babysat. You're opening the schools to allow essential workers and other workers that have to go in the office to have kids, a place to put their kids, aren't you? That's the primary reason here.
Well, I don't consider that babysitting, because pre-COVID there were many New Zealanders where the mum and dad or both partners worked and kids went to school because that's what kids do. We're moving back to a situation which is slightly more normal than level 4, of course, but it's nowhere close to pre-COVID levels. So it's not a babysitting service. It is a school where the children will be learning as they were pre-COVID.
So attending school is going to be voluntary, the Prime Minister says, and if you can keep your kids at home, do. So you've got kids. Would you be happy for them to go into a school in this circumstance?
In the circumstance, I would, but I'm very lucky. My wife works from home. And so the Prime Minister has said if you can work from home, please do. If you can keep your kids at home, please do. We'll be keeping the 2 young ones at home.
There are lots of emails coming into us while you've been talking to us about garden centres. Are they going to be allowed to be opened under level 3?
Well, it depends. And the reason I say that is because what we've said, if people can organise a click and collect model where there's no contact between staff in an organisation and customers, then they could well open. But we will not be getting back to a stage where people pull up in a garden centre car park, go wandering through the aisles, pick up their plants and go to a checkout. That sort of system, we're way away from that at this point in time. So if there's a click and collect, then yes, as long as they have a self-accreditation scheme in place which proves to their staff and their customers that they are safe. But this is not normal. So please don't get the impression that we're going back to pre-COVID ways.
Can people move house during level 3?
Yes, they can.
Okay. So another question has come in about a pregnant women who might be going into hospital over the next few weeks. If we drop to level 3, this person asks, will they be able to take a support person with them into the hospital when they deliver their baby?
Well, it's funny you say that. A very good friend of mine's wife delivered her baby at 2:42 a.m. this morning. Congratulations to Rob. He was there for the delivery, but then had to leave soon after.
So under level 3?
But sorry, Lisa, I can't argue whether that person, the husband partner, will be able to stay as long as they did pre-COVID. So I haven't got an answer to that.
Okay, unknown at this point. All right, another person is asking if we own a batch in the same region that we normally reside in, can we go to our batch under level 3?
No, and look, I own a batch in Mahia, which is within my electorate and within the Hawke's Bay region. No, you're not allowed to go to your batch. Stick at home. Stick within your slightly enlarged bubble if you need be. But again, let's not undo all the really great work that we've done so far. You can go to your batch. There'll be plenty of time to go to your batch after this. But let's just be safe for the meantime. So no, preferably not.
Campbell's got in touch to ask if mountain biking and tramping is okay under level 3. Why can't we hunt if we stick to our region? Campbell goes on to say that the statistics support that the 2 aforementioned hobbies, biking and tramping, are a lot more dangerous than hunting.
Well, what we've said you can do is, you can go surfing, you can go fishing, as long as you're fishing from the shore, not in a boat. I'm assuming if you're going hunting, then you've got to jump in a car and drive, so you're not living on the farm within, wandering over your fence and hunting. So again, we want to limit travel to only essential travel. So you're going to and from work, you're going to and from the hospital if you need to, you're going to and from the supermarket, but non-essential travel, again, we want to limit.
The Prime Minister said today that swimming's okay, right? Swimming's okay, she said. So not many people have a beach on their back door. So how far is it okay to travel if you were going to go to the beach?
Well, again, we want people to use their common sense, really, and we're heading into winter.
What does your common sense tell you? If you wanted to take your kids to the beach, how far would be acceptable to go under level 3 we're talking?
Well, I wouldn't expect you to jump in a car and drive for half an hour to get to the beach. I would think that would be non-essential travel and therefore unnecessary, therefore outside the rules. Again, Lisa, I'll go back to the point. We have done incredibly well so far, and we want to eliminate COVID from our country, and I think we're on track to do that.
Understood. But people are eager to know. People are eager to know kind of what the parameters are so that they can be good citizens and keep within them. So with that beach example that we use, what would you say is an acceptable drive time? Or is it the situation under level 3, unless you can walk to the beach, then you shouldn't be going? What's your feeling?
Yeah, my feeling is stick to the level 4 restrictions we're in at the moment. If you can't walk to the beach, then don't go to the beach. But again, we want to limit non-essential travel. We've been very clear about that, but we do know that there's going to be a lot more cars on the road as people head to work, drop the kids off at the school, and or go and collect stuff they've bought through the click and collect sort of process. So there will be more cars on the road, but we want to limit non-essential travel. We in essence, Lisa, what we want to do is ensure that people don't have contact with those they don't need to.
Right, got you. The other question that we've got is, if you got stuck somewhere else during lockdown in a city that you don't normally live in, say for example Wellington, and you would like to get back to your actual home in Dunedin, can you go under level 3?
Well, I haven't got an absolute answer to that, but I cannot see why not. I don't know Wellington to Dunedin because you've got to cross the ferry. Again, I don't know what the flight situation will be or what the ferry situation will be. But if you're stuck in Picton and you need to go home to Dunedin, I don't see there's any reason why you can't jump in your car and drive down to Dunedin. But again, let's keep the basic principle always at front of mind. Limit the amount of people you're in contact with, and only through that way will we be able to eliminate COVID from our country.
OK, if you could put your police minister's hat on for a second, how are your police managing to maintain physical distancing protocols in their work? Is it even possible?
It's very difficult, and what we find at any point in time...
Impossible?
There are a number... close to impossible, but what they have done is these are essential workers, and the police hierarchy has put a list of requirements in place to keep their workers safe. But, we've got men and women out there who are still dealing with rat bags in the worst possible circumstances. So I take my hat off to a policeman and woman. I think they're doing a fantastic job. And as mentioned, at any point in time, a number are self-isolating because of people they've come in contact with in their normal course of duties.
Appreciate your time this evening. That is the government spokesperson today, who is Minister Stuart Nash. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, principals warn that a partial reopening of schools at Alert Level 3 will be difficult and challenging. Countdown opens its first online-only supermarket, and a 99-year-old World War II veteran in Brazil has beaten the odds to become one of the oldest people to recover from COVID-19. We'd love your feedback. What do you make of the rules and regulations around Alert Level 3? Do you like what you see or not? Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But let's get to the headlines now with Paul Brennan.
Thanks, Lisa. An estimated 500,000 people could be back to work if COVID-19 level 4 is lifted next week. The government has this afternoon announced the rules in the event that the country moves to level 3, and a decision will be made on Monday. Construction work would be allowed to resume, but public-facing businesses will remain closed. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says it's important for the economy not to move to level 3 too early and risk having to go back into full lockdown. The country's had the lowest number of positive COVID-19 cases since lockdown. The Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, announced 15 new cases today, and he says investigation teams have been working to find out where new cases were transmitted. The results indicate a low rate of community transmission since level 4 began. Principals are warning the partial reopening of schools under a lower pandemic alert level will be complicated. Children up to year 10 will be allowed back to school if New Zealand moves to alert level 3 next week. But as it's voluntary, principals say they'll have extra work to juggle those still online. People can include the over 70s in their bubbles under alert level 3 if they practice good hygiene and maintain their distance. The Director-General of Health says bubbles can be expanded slightly, but people need to remain vigilant and practice good hygiene. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says if there's any sign people are starting to congregate under the newly announced rules, there will be a review. Rules around recreation will be loosened to include swimming, surfing and fishing onshore, although riskier activities will still be banned. And retailers are trying to figure out how they can operate under the new rules, which require minimal face-to-face contact. Retail NZ's Chief Executive Greg Harford says about 3/4 of retailers have some sort of digital presence set up and are ready to go. And those are the headlines.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome back. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's get to the business news now with Nona Peltier. Hello, Nona. Cinema software company Vista Group is needing to raise capital. I mean, how much does it need?
Like $65 million. $65 million, it's a lot. So, well, people aren't going to the movie theatres, Lisa.
Well, they can't, can they? And it seems like they won't be able under level 3 either. So this obviously makes their position pretty difficult.
Yeah, so they provide the software that runs these cinemas, and of course their companies are the companies that buy the software have no money to pay them. So they're working with their customers. They're expecting the cinemas to perhaps stay closed until the end of the year, but they're planning for them to be sort of progressively opening through 2021. And in the meantime, they're kind of thinking, what could we do to make some money? And so one of the ideas that was discussed on the call, the investment call today, was perhaps offering, sort of an Uber drive-by, pick up some movies popcorn to enjoy while you're in the pleasure of your own company at home. Who knows?
Interesting. Okay, well, on the job front, the number of job ads is well down, as we would probably anticipate. But what are the actual numbers?
They're not very good. I almost hate telling you, but, the numbers fell, and this is just in March, 30%. These are job ads, right? Not actual jobs, but advertising for jobs. Yep. And that compares with 8% drop in February. So we were already seeing that weakness. March, 30%. And the job sectors, now this sort of surprised me a bit. So the number of ads, the biggest job, the loss was mostly in the area of sports and recreation, which I guess isn't particularly surprising, and then closely followed by tourism and hospitality. That kind of did surprise me. I would have thought that would have been the worst sector, but not necessarily. And the statistics, which are gathered by the BNZ Seek Employment Survey, they're saying that if you looked at the Australian data, they would give you an indication of where we're heading. And in that country, it was down at 65%.
Eek. What else has been happening on the markets today?
Interesting again, there was some terrible data out of the United States in terms of some job numbers and retail sales, factory production, and so forth. This did not encourage people very much. In fact, the retail sales and manufacturing output fell by the most in 74 years. That's huge numbers we're talking. Anyways, of course, that raised the fear of a deep recession, not surprisingly. And so that market didn't do very well. And that mood carried through to Asia. But for some reason, New Zealand was somewhat resilient to that. And so our market index, the top 50, rose 0.6%, 63 points up to 10,473. Now that compares with the ASX, which I looked at a little bit, not so long ago, was down 1.5%. So it didn't, but it did manage to drag us down because we were much stronger earlier on in the day.
Oh,
this is a pattern we typically. And the dollar. Now we are a little bit weaker there.
We're just losing you a bit there, Nona. So quickly try and give us the dollar, but the Skype machine is doing some funny things.
59.5 US, 94.8 Australian, and 47.7 British pence.
Brilliant. We got all of those. Thanks, Nona. That's Nona Peltier joining us via Skype for your business news. Former travel managers, bar staff, event crew and lighting technicians are among the dozens of staff who have started jobs stacking shelves at a new Countdown supermarket today. The Auckland store is the company's first online-only supermarket and will be able to fill up to 15,000 orders a week when it reaches capacity. It's created more than 100 new jobs. Many of those have been filled by people whose worlds have been turned upside down in recent weeks from the COVID-19 fallout. Today, our cameraman Nick Munro and reporter Nita Blake-Person went to meet some of them.
The aisles of this new e-supermarket are a long way from Oliver Hutchinson's former job as a travel manager.
It's a definite change. It's very different to my cushy office job, but it's work and I'm appreciative for it and gets me out of the house, gets the rent paid. So I'm very lucky, I think.
Oliver had been in his job at the flight centre for less than a year, so was one of the first to be let go when the travel industry ground to a halt. In perhaps a sign of the times, today he's filling online orders for delivery at the country's first purpose-built e-supermarket.
I think there's a shared sort of shock that everyone's getting over because it has happened so suddenly. But there's also, that sense that we are the fortunate ones who are able to transition into something else, because obviously there's so many people out there who this is really hurting and that they don't have the same options for financial mobility. But the pay is very different.
There are more than 100 new staff on board here today. They're helping to do the shopping for thousands of households, filling orders which are then delivered to their front door.
We have been recruiting from all sorts of industries. So we have had team join us who were flight attendants. We've had team join us from the hospitality industry. I guess taking every opportunity to give people new jobs in our sector is important for us at the moment.
Countdown's digital manager Sally Copeland says while the store was in the works before COVID, the lockdown and limits on people leaving their homes has caused a massive increase in online shopping.
As you can imagine, the last 4 weeks, so everyone being in lockdown, we've just seen absolute demand for our service skyrocket. It's a big, massive site, 8,800 square metres. It can do 7,500 orders as a starting point, and we're going to grow the facility to about 15,000 orders, and they are all for home delivery.
The products are the same and the aisles look the same, but the obvious massive difference is there's no shoppers here, no trolleys to bump into each other and no people vying for space. It feels like the future of food grocery shopping, and in a world where there's COVID-19, keeping our physical distance is more important now than ever before.
And that demand for online shopping is creating work when every job counts.
I was studying. I study IT at MIT. It's fine. I like to be a help to people.
I was at a bar and restaurant in St Heliers. We're currently closed at the moment with COVID-19, so this was an opportunity for me to pick up some more work and help out with the essential services. It's kind of nice to have all these different people working together.
Well, for me personally, this was like my foot into the industry and just starting my way up from there.
I used to be an event lighting technician. I luckily got out just before the lockdown and I'm now working here. Big change. I used to work in a warehouse, so there's similar aspects, but it's definitely a change,
Being of service to other people, getting their shopping in and shopping as if I'm shopping for myself, and being really careful and making sure that they get the best of the best.
The staff here say they're the lucky ones.
Thousands of people losing their jobs with only hundreds created.
And they have some advice for those caught up in the COVID chaos.
Everyone just hold on and keep pushing through this and it'll be over soon.
For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
And if you were listening to that on the radio, don't forget you can go online and look at Nita and Nick's piece and see the video pictures with it. 2 more repatriation exercises are likely to go ahead in the next few days, but there are questions about how successfully they'll be in bringing New Zealanders home. Some stuck overseas say they just can't afford the $5,500 homeward bound fare because it would put them in too much debt. But the Prime Minister says the fares don't come close to covering the costs of operating the flight. Jordan Bond reports.
With no other way home, some trapped New Zealanders couldn't say yes more quickly to a repatriation flight. But for some, it turns out to be not such an easy decision when the fare is the equivalent of 2 or 3 months' rent for an average house. With a partner or children, the flight could cost some families $10,000 or $20,000. In Western India, Palak Magwana and her daughter were visiting family when the country shut down and their return flight was cancelled. She has no choice but to fork out to get them back and then cut the few luxuries she has on her single income.
No more expenses, possibly no more going to the movie, dining, no more new clothes for about an year until I saved all $11,000. That's the only way I can save all the money. I still have to pay my rent, my car, my daughter's daycare because I work full-time and I'm a single mother.
On the 900-strong Kiwis Stuck in India Facebook page, more than 100 people said they would turn down the flight because of the cost. The country went into lockdown before New Zealand did, and with only 4 hours' notice before it took effect, there was no way out for foreigners. Natalie Maria's mother is in the Philippines, where a rescue flight was announced this morning, but she's thinking about staying there because the fare is so high.
If they're going through their efforts, then they need to make it accessible as well financially for people, especially given that so many people who will be in that situation will already have had, extra unexpected either costs or losses.
Today, the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern defended the price, saying these flights are an expensive exercise.
We are substantially subsidising bringing those Kiwis home. I do acknowledge, though, that we are asking for a payment, and that's because the expectation is if you were overseas, you would have to get home somehow. It just so happens you'll be doing it via a flight that New Zealanders are supporting substantially.
Last week, a group of Australian citizens organised their own repatriation flight from Delhi to Melbourne. It cost passengers $2,200 Australian dollars each, less than half of what the New Zealand government flight will cost. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says if people can't pay up front, they can loan them the money on the condition it's all paid back. For Checkpoint, call Jordan Bond, TNA.
And it's 5:45. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Regional health services are working harder than ever to look after vulnerable communities during the Level 4 lockdown. One of those is Hora Tepai Māori Health Service in Kapiti, who, aside from offering their usual medical services, has also been giving out food to people who've lost their income or are struggling with the lockdown. This comes as the seriousness of COVID-19 hits home for the region, with confirmation this week a 70-year-old Kapiti man died due to the disease. Hora Tepai invited our reporter Logan Church and cameraman Dom Thomas to see how they and their community are coping.
It's early in the morning, and despite the cold, the Hora Tepai team are standing in a large circle outside their building for a karakia. They do this every morning. The way this team works has changed dramatically over the past few weeks, and how they serve their 1,500 clients in the area. Inside, Dr. Chris Fawcett is getting ready for consultations over the phone. He's concerned about communities that may have COVID-19 in them without realising it.
The numbers of people with COVID appear to be going down, which is great. But the concern, and I think it's a fairly widespread concern, is that if there are pockets of COVID in a community, particularly a high needs community, they could spread really quickly. We need to be very vigilant in our community, and particularly the other high needs communities around Wellington, that we are actually swabbing the right people.
Before long, we have to go, as appointments begin.
What are we doing for you this morning? Okay, tell me a wee bit more about your sore throat. How long have you had it for?
Only a stone's throw away from their building at Kapiti Health Centre is drive-through COVID testing stations under a large white tent. Cars have been coming and going all morning. Back outside the centre and suiting up are outreach nurse Shannon and community worker Robin. On goes gowns, masks and gloves before they enter a house. Their work has ramped up over the past couple of weeks, so appointments that might usually take place in the clinic can happen at home.
We're a lot busier. I suppose we're trying to keep people out of the clinic, so our workload is probably doubled.
First up, they're stopping at a home to give immunisations. Then a welfare check on a man staying in a hostel during the lockdown. Finally, a trip to the Kapiti Food Bank to pick up food for another one of their clients. It's really busy here. A team of 2 volunteers are sourcing food inside. They would usually have more volunteers working, but 90% of the volunteers that would usually be here are over 70 years old and are staying at home. In between handing out food parcels, the food bank's coordinator, Kerry Lovell, told us the food bank is seeing a far more diverse range of clients.
Young people, particularly 16 to 20-year-olds that have suddenly lost their jobs, and it's taking a while for them to get income. We have quite a few, particularly men, who come in and the despair in their eyes is very real. They don't know how to feed their families. and they don't know when the next money's coming from, and it's really nice to help them.
The demand for basic things like food is so high that Hora Tapai is helping to set up another food bank in nearby Waikanai. A carving workshop is now stacked with canned food, toilet paper and other essentials. Boxes are being stacked by the health centre staff.
We're putting butter, chicken, biscuits, eggs, sugar. I think we've got coffee, tea.
Hora Tapai manager Cherie Seamark says there is a growing need for the essentials her team are giving out.
With this COVID situation, we've now joined up with our local iwi, Te Aotearoa ki Whakarongotai, and we're providing today care packages on behalf of iwi, and my workers are here packing them up and delivering them because we're essential workers and we can get out. It's our job here on the Kapiti Coast to ensure that our whānau are looked after, their care is taken, their medical care is taken care of, and they have access to what they need.
The floor of this workshop cum food bank is covered in bags and boxes ready to be delivered. They will continue to work like this for as long as needed, a helping hand at a time of great need. For Checkpoint, Logan Church.
Week 3 of lockdown down, and it's time to check in with two bubbles keeping video diaries during the lockdown for us. The Oliver family of Pukekohe, including 4 children, and 73-year-old Tricia, who specifically moved in with her son and his partner for the lockdown, making it a snug bubble of 3 near Wellington. This week on the Bubble Diaries, a handsome but uninvited guest bursts one bubble.
I'd like to introduce you to a new member of our bubble. Now, we haven't broken any lockdown rules.
And further north, the Olivers scramble for eggs.
Not in cupboards, not in the...
Where could they be?
But we get ahead of ourselves. Back to lockdown day 15. Remember, Tricia is a keen cyclist. Well, the wheels haven't quite fallen off, but close.
Well, it was the end of a sorry bike ride, really. I set off as usual, have a lovely ride down by the river. And then coming back, suddenly there was a nasty, one of those funny noises that you always dread on a bike or in a car, and clunk down came the pedal and whatever this bit's called, the cog, I suppose.
Tricia holds that bit in her right hand like metaphorical roadkill. A nice guy tried to help from a distance, of course, but no dice.
So that was really the end of that, and I've just walked all the way home. Glad to be back.
Same day, and up north, the Oliver family are doing good on Good Friday.
Our neighbour is a single mum of 4 children, and I know she doesn't have a car, so we thought we'd do something nice for her. So here's what we bought for her, just simple things, milk, some chips for the kids, bread, and some Easter eggs.
Next day, and 2-year-old Kenny is literally on the run, up and down the driveway, chased by his sisters. The family's getting ahead of the gorge and rest phase of the weekend with one of its group workouts.
And you're just slowly rotating the plate around 5 times each direction.
Kenny, though, is marching to the beat of a drum only he can hear, wandering about with large chunks of polystyrene raised above his head like a toddler Incredible Hulk, pestering his sisters.
Kenny, stop it, please.
In all of this strangeness, Mum, Lesielli's not letting go of the familiar.
We normally have our favourite, which is lamb. It's the Chelsea Winters recipe, which we absolutely love. I'll let you have a look.
Picture a monster slab of lamb coated in the stuff that's bound to make it delicious. Is that a bit of time? Because they have plenty of it. About now, the detail is starting to slide in both bubbles. No one is exactly sure of the days. It's just the day before or after the day you're in right now.
Hello everyone, it's day 16 of the lockdown, we think. We had to count backwards.
Then a beautiful stranger actually crashes into your bubble.
I found this poor carrier outside my bedroom window. It had obviously gone into the glass. It looked as if it had a broken wing. It was pouring with rain. We tried to entice it into a box, but it wouldn't go in. Next morning, to be honest, I thought nature would have taken over, but no, there was the carrier, still bright-eyed, if not bushy-tailed.
A call to Doc, and this bubble's got its own recipe on the go. This one's for recovery.
And my son gave it some berries, some leaves, with a lovely bit of straw and even a hot water bottle on 2 cold nights. But it's lovely to have something positive and new to talk about in our bubble.
So, 3 humans, 2 neurotic cats and now a wounded koutou is in this bubble. And a transient bunny too. Next day an egg is delivered to Tricia.
Thank you very, very much. Of course, we haven't got one for you because we're too vulnerable.
A stark reminder that at 73, Tricia shouldn't even be going to the supermarket. In Pukekohe, the Oliver kids shake down the house for eggs. It's a scramble.
What about under the table, Kenny? You want to look under?
Wow.
I just finished finding all my Easter eggs and here they are.
Nothing insulates a bubble like a thick layer of chocolate and crispy, slow-cooked lamb. Day 19, Tricia thinks...
Day 19 apparently, although we have to keep checking.
Either way, she's in the garden.
I seem to spend an awful lot of time sweeping up leaves, and as soon as you turned your back, they're back again.
Keeping yourself busy in lockdown is practically a full-time job.
Hi everyone. Well, it's Tuesday. It's at least day 20. Feels like a lot more, but I think it is only day 20.
It's quiz night because the brain needs a workout too. All the rallies are up on a split computer screen, muttering knowledgeably.
And who won?
We were second. That's all I know.
Retiree Tricia's part of a Porirua trust working to close the digital divide for kids. They're meeting on Zoom these days. With her only real connection to the outside world now online, Tricia's dedication to the cause is cemented further.
And basically it's a project I feel very, very committed to, and all more so in these online extraordinary circumstances that we're in at the moment, whereby we just want to make sure that kids in more disadvantaged parts of the country, in this case Porirua, do not fall even further behind and become more disadvantaged with their education because they don't have access to online technology.
At the Olivers in Pukekohe, a guilty-looking dad has escaped the bubble for a virtual world.
I caught you. What are you doing?
Just finishing that game that I told you about.
I'm constantly catching him playing computer games when he should be working. So I'm looking forward to having my office space back.
Life in any bubble is punctuated by distractions if you're lucky enough to find them. By the end of week 3, the Olivers are daring to dream of the afterlife, life after lockdown.
The end is now in sight. And with that, I'm now asking everyone, what is one of the first things you're looking forward to doing when lockdown is over? And here are the answers.
I want to go see my friends and family. Going swimming and seeing my friends.
I'm looking forward to going back to the gym again.
What I'm looking forward to is seeing my friends again and going outside and playing on a playground or something like that.
And I'm going to visit my sister and my sister-in-law.
Wow, a lot of you are getting in touch about what lockdown level 3 would mean to you as well, that shifting down a level if indeed it happens. This person says, Len says the lockdown needs to continue for as long as the risk of COVID-19 spreading through the community exists. The precautionary principle should reign, even if that means another week or more in lockdown at level 4. Please don't let us give in to the economic imperative, making money, and thereby imperil the health imperative. Someone else, Lynn from Tauranga, says, next step is too hard on single elderly who live alone with no computer access to order or buy winter clothing or anything else supermarkets don't sell. I'm fed up with the status quo now and think we, the elderly, should be given the chance to shop with EFTPOS or cash using mask and gloves and distance. Thanks a lot, Jacinda. You really have got it in for Winston's lot. That is from Lynn, a single retiree in Tauranga. And also this one, Peter says, tough months to come. My concern is that the self-entitled, privileged and simply dumb will flout the rules and unnecessarily move us back into lockdown level 4. I would have liked to have heard the Prime Minister together with the Police Commissioner make a no-nonsense statement concerning fines and jail. This is serious stuff. Why talk about a high-trust environment when it's obvious the few will spoil things for all of us? And this one on Stuart Nash, the Minister who is the government spokesperson today. Nash was the ringman to interpret what the Prime Minister had to say. I went to live in our batch prior to lockdown. According to Nash, I can't go back to my permanent residence until we get back to normality. A journey of 120 kilometres. What a mess, says John. Someone else says some of those people overseas complaining about the cost of repatriation flights are ungrateful and entitled. As the PM said, the flights are greatly subsidised. So it would be better if people had to find their own way home. And that is Maureen from Christchurch getting in touch. And I've just been handed another little bit of feedback. Let me stretch over there and get it. This one is from Kelly in Point Chev. She says, I truly like the idea of ordering things online. Click and collect for things such as ordering takeaways to food shopping online, heaps. Smashing idea, she says. And Reese has got in touch to say common sense tells me that people living in Raglan going for a surf is no more risk than a person in Hamilton travelling within their region to stay at their Raglan batch. Yeah, I see what you're saying there, Reese. There is a lot of kind of conflicting messages. Another person says the biggest advantage of the proposed level 3 rules is that we get the opportunity to increase workplace activity.
RNZ News at 6, no mai, haere mai. I'm Paul Brennan. Alert Level 3 will still focus on keeping contact with others to a bare minimum, but some restrictions around travel, business and activities will be loosened. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern gave more detail today on what life at Alert Level 3 will look like. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
Under Alert Level 3, bubbles can be slightly expanded and people can travel within their region. If you can work from home, you should. But industries like forestry, construction and trades could reopen under strict distancing and hygiene rules. Hospitality and retail can operate through takeaways, deliveries and online orders. Funerals and wedding services can go ahead, but only with 10 people and no functions. Cabinet will decide on Monday whether to move to the lower alert level. From Parliament, Yvette McCullough.
Cabinet Minister Stuart Nash says the amount of people who can work under Alert Level 3 will double, but socialising with friends in person still won't be allowed. There are currently about 500,000 people working under Level 4, and that number is expected to rise to 1 million under Level 3. But Mr Nash has told Checkpoint that social contact will still need to be kept to a minimum.
You know, you're allowed to invite family or a caregiver, and that's about it. You know, if people think they're going to go back to pre-COVID levels where they're having beers with their mates, they're not. That is a way off.
Stuart Nash says human contact should be reduced, but he thinks hugging close family members added to your bubble will be okay. Contractors are getting ready to resume construction work when the Level 4 lockdown lifts, putting about 300,000 people back on the job. Industry associations are working on health and safety protocols, which must be in place beforehand. Peter Silcock of the Industry Association Civil Contractors New Zealand says its members employ 40,000 workers, mostly on infrastructure sites, and he expects work to resume quite quickly.
But it won't, of course, happen on the first day, so there's a lot that our members need to do to get their sites ready for people coming back to work and implementing the new protocols that have been developed.
Chief Executive of Civil Contractors Peter Silcock. The Director General of Health says COVID-19 Alert Level 3 will need people to be more accountable and vigilant if the virus is to be stamped out. At Level 3, people will still be asked to stay home, but there will be looser restrictions on travel, business, recreation and schooling. Ashley Bloomfield says while New Zealand is over the peak of coronavirus cases, the country's not out of the woods, and that will still be the case in Level 3.
And if anything, we need to be even more vigilant because everybody will have potentially more contact with others. So it's actually a lower level in terms of the alert level, but increased vigilance by everybody.
Ashley Bloomfield. 15 new cases were announced today, the lowest since March the 22nd. A New Zealander in the Philippines may not take a government-chartered rescue flight if it costs $5,000. The Philippines is the latest country to have a repatriation flight announced for Kiwis. Natalie Maria's mother is there, and although she's sometimes had difficulty accessing food, she might decide to stay if the flight is $5,000, as others have been.
If they're going through that effort, then they need to make it accessible as well financially for people, especially given that so many people who will be in that situation will already have had extra unexpected either costs or losses.
Natalie Maria. The Prime Minister has defended the price, saying it does not cover the full cost and the government is subsidising it. A safety review has found 81 trucks and other heavy vehicles with problems that are a high risk. The Transport Agency has revoked the certifications of 33 of these and of 43 vehicles in total. In half of the cases, the problem has been with towing components such as tow bars. The agency says a common cause is calculation errors that mean a tow bar is overstressed or doesn't meet design standards. The agency has spent $6 million since last year on the ongoing review and inspections and recertifications resulting from it as part of more than 2 years of investigations into heavy vehicle road worthiness. It's nearly 6:04. On to sport now. New Zealand's top rugby players are having to shoulder much of the wage cut as the sport looks at ways to survive COVID-19. The New Zealand Rugby Union and the Players Association have agreed that $25 million, or 50% of the remaining players' spend for 2020, will be frozen. Players who receive a base salary of less than $50,000 won't lose any of that money, but those on more will have up to 30% of their salaries frozen. All Blacks and Super Rugby players are to have their retainers cut by 15% from May 1st. New Zealand Rugby Players Association Chief Executive Rob Nichols says he's been impressed at the way players have handled the talks.
That's something our player membership is comfortable with. It's about them stepping up in the positions that they're in. And, that was all part of the strategy we put together and that everyone bought into. And so the players have handled it fantastically.
Rob Nichols of the Rugby Players Association, and that's the news.
This is a COVID-19 official government announcement. We all need to continue to stay home and save lives. Alert Level 4 restrictions still apply. Don't visit your work or another household. If you have flu-like symptoms, cough, shortness of breath or a fever, please get tested. Contact your GP or Healthline. Don't delay seeking medical care for things other than COVID-19 symptoms. If you see people breaching Alert Level 4 requirements, report it online at www.police.govt.nz/105support. Don't phone police direct and don't intervene. The best protection for everyone is to thoroughly and regularly wash your hands with soap and water. Go to covid19.govt.nz for more information.
Now the short forecast from Med-Service to midnight tomorrow Friday. Northland to Horowhenua, that includes Coromandel and the Central High Country. Showers becoming isolated this evening, though rain tomorrow, possibly heavy and thundery. For the rest of the North Island, fine apart from isolated showers for the rest of today. Scattered rain tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, fine with high cloud at times. Scattered rain tomorrow, mainly about the ranges and sounds. Canterbury, fine today, a few spots of rain possible tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, a few showers. Rain tomorrow, some heavy falls, then easing to isolated showers. Otago and Southland, mainly fine, but a few showers about the south coast until this evening. Early rain tomorrow, then a few showers mainly about the coast, and just occasional showers at the Chatham Islands. It's 6:07.
Thanks, Paul. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Under Alert Level 3, students up to Year 10 can return to classrooms. That's if they want to. The Prime Minister says more people will be allowed to go back to work under Level 3 and children under the age of 14 cannot legally be left home alone. But teachers and students will still have to keep their social distance. So how is this actually going to work? Auckland Grammar's headmaster Tim O'Connor joins me now. Tim, what do you make of this decision?
I've got no idea how it's going to work, Lisa, at all. It's a sit-on-the-fence sort of decision, and probably, well, it is, from my mindset, one of the most irresponsible decisions for New Zealand education in my time as headmaster of a school.
What's irresponsible about it?
Well, if it's safe to partially reopen a school under a Level 3, then wouldn't we be targeting the students who are in most need in the secondary sector? And that would be the Year 12 and 13 students who are sitting external qualifications, NCA or Cambridge or IB. This is a decision, it appears to be about the provision of childcare services as businesses reopen. So the government's not making a decision about education, it's making a decision about how to provide childcare for reopening the country. That, to me, is more irresponsible than David Parker going out for a mountain bike ride or Winston Peters fishing from his front lawn.
So, Tim, do you think you're being used as glorified babysitters?
Oh, totally. Why else do you provide? Do you only allow those to return up to the age of 14? That is about childcare service. Why do you make it voluntary for people to do so? Because doing that means that teachers can't actually do anything. They can't just teach those who turn up and then teach online those who don't turn up. You know, it's a half dozen this way and six the other way, if you know what I mean.
I do, but I suppose these are extraordinary times. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We've got pilots and cabin crew stacking supermarket shelves as well. People have had to adapt and, well, suck a few things up. So why shouldn't teachers be asked to do the same?
Well, just be honest about it then and say that schools have to provide childcare service. We're not educational institutions for the next month. At least then you've got a bit of honesty around it. That this is actually not about education at all. It's not teachers' job just to be a babysitting service. But if that's what the government wants, because they've given themselves those powers to do that through this sort of pandemic, then be honest about it and say that. But don't pretend.
How will you keep kids safe if you have to open your doors? Physical distancing? How many kids would you conceivably think were safe in a classroom? I mean, how would this work?
Oh, no idea, really. I mean, I think the only thing we could do is suggest that you're providing a study service for students when it's voluntary, as to whether you come or not, and you're a 12, 13, 14-year-old, and it's voluntary. It's going to be some interesting decisions made, isn't it? Aren't there? If we were permitted to have students return to school, for example, if the education sector had been canvassed and consulted about this, then I'm sure anyone in the secondary sector would say return year 12 and 13. And we could have then put a plan in place to spread students across the campus, to lower the class numbers across campus so you could make it safe to teach and to be teaching subjects by specialist teachers. That's not difficult. But what we've been given here is partial bits of information. In fact, the Secretary-General emailed all principals at 4 o'clock today to say, we'll start working with you more next week about this, so we can work through some of the practical issues that might need to be addressed. Well, there's a whole pile of practical issues that need to be addressed through this scenario.
Do you think it can be done safely? What's your gut feeling? Well,
I'm not Ashley Bloomfield or the Ministry of Health. We'd have to take their advice. If alert level 3, it is deemed that it's safe to return students to school or for schools to partially reopen, then yes, absolutely. We want students back in classes as soon as possible. And we can do that safely by all of the measures that we had in place prior to going into lockdown: hand sanitizer, extra cleaning, distancing, no assemblies. All of those sorts of things can mean that a school can operate safely.
But if you're going to abide by the 2 metre rule, 1 metre at worst, conceivably how many kids can you fit in the classroom?
You could fit 15 to 20 in a classroom quite easily. In our classrooms. I mean, our classrooms are designed to seat 38, so halve that, no problem.
What pressure do you think this puts on teachers?
Well, I think what this has done is actually just confused the educational sector, full stop. There's no clarity out of this. There's no leadership being provided out of this for the sector. So we're having to make it up as we go along. So we're dealing with partial bits of information to try and actually put an operational system in where we can teach and we can operate in a safe manner. Right now, we've only got little bits of information, and those bits of information just simply aren't good enough.
So the email you've got, just to be clear, that came from Iona Holstead, I'm picking, was the first information you received. There was no consultation about this plan prior to it being announced by the government today.
Not with principals. No, it doesn't appear that there was consultation with the sector at all. This appears to be a cabinet decision. I don't think there's been any educational consultation being undertaken in this process at all.
So when exactly did you find out that at level 3 this would be the scenario?
I listened to the radio like everyone else today, and then received the 4 p.m. email, which says very little.
So what was your reaction then when you're listening in and you hear it when everyone else does?
Well, I was laughing really because it was very sad, because you start clicking through your head, what are the ways we could actually operate in this? What does this mean? And look, the very first conclusion that I came to was that this isn't actually about teaching. This isn't actually about what's best for education in this country. This is about being able to provide a childcare service so we can start reopening the country. And look, if that's the decision, we'd live with it. But let's just say that that's the decision, that's what we have to suck up right now. So we can't, there's not enough information here for us to get operational. I had a Zoom meeting planned with our leadership team tomorrow, but there's not really much point in us going ahead with that until we get more detail as to what this is going to look like for our school.
How long do you think it would take you to get ready for level 3?
24 hours to be operational. Look, we've planned to be open again. We've told our community that we would reopen. Our plan was to reopen on Tuesday the 28th and to be in full teaching mode on campus. So we've talked about online teaching and on-campus teaching. So our plan was to be teaching again 28 April if all things going according to plan. I could live with it if we were announced that we could partially reopen and that we could then decide which year levels could return. We could live with that, because I would return year 12 and 13 and we'd get on with teaching and we'd spread the teaching load, and I could then describe to our teachers the premise by which we were going to act. And I have no doubt that those teachers who are listening and the teachers, as I communicated that I'd have 100% support.
But that decision has obviously been taken out of your hands, with the government already defining what level 3 will look like. I just want to ask you a couple of quick questions before you go. In your view, can schools continue to charge fees? State integrated schools, private schools?
State integrated schools, well, state and integrated schools don't charge fees. We just ask for donations. I imagine we will continue to ask for donations, and those who can afford it will no doubt support us if they think we've been doing a good enough job. Happy to be measured in that regard. Private sector, well, that's going to be a decision school by school as to how their community is going to respond to them. I would imagine some form of scaling back of fees would be appropriate.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That's Auckland Grammar's headmaster, Tim O'Connor there, who's not entirely happy with what will happen to education under level 3 when we get there. It is 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. New Zealand's top rugby players will miss out on a combined $25 million if no more matches are possible this year. After several weeks of negotiations, details have been confirmed concerning pay cuts for the country's leading players as a result of the coronavirus crisis. Like many sporting organisations around the world, New Zealand Rugby is bracing for a significant financial hit. Clay Wilson has more on how players will help to ease the burden on our national game.
New Zealand's elite rugby players are used to taking big hits. But coming in at a combined $25 million, or 50% of their remaining payments for this year, this blow stings in an entirely different way. The figures, though, will only come to fruition if a resumption of matches in 2020 simply isn't possible. Players Association boss Rob Nicol says planning for the worst-case scenario was a vital part of their discussions.
We did it so that players could get their heads around what that looked like, get the advice and the guidance and support they needed to pull the levers or act now to manage that scenario. But hey, we're hopeful that there will be an opportunity to get on the field, and it may be that we get to the point we can unfreeze some of these payments.
All players with base salaries of more than $50,000 will lose 15%, growing to 30% in September. Those with a base retainer under that mark are safe. It's something made possible, in part, by top-earning players sacrificing a greater chunk of their total pay packets. Nichols says that group have agreed to forego a significant amount in regards to assembly fees, incentives and bonus payments.
That's something our player membership is comfortable with. It's about them stepping up in the positions that they're in. And, that was all part of the strategy we put together and that everyone bought into. And so the players have handled it fantastically.
The announcement has been several weeks in the making. But New Zealand Rugby head of professional Chris Lendrum says neither party felt in any rush, adding that fairness and a complex player payment system meant negotiations needed to be thorough.
There's a number of different buckets, I suppose, players can potentially qualify for, and just getting the balance of how we reduced all of those different buckets was really important to us, because equity and fairness is hugely important.
It's all about trying to minimise the financial impact on everyone involved with rugby in New Zealand. Lendrum says while the agreement works on a worst-case scenario, they're hopeful it won't get to that and ready to adjust things accordingly.
We've got the ability to sit down with them at any point and review where we're at. If things improve, then we get together with them immediately and talk about how we might want to allocate increased revenue.
That, of course, depends on the multi-million-dollar question of when matches can resume. Dates or formats of any kind are yet to be agreed, but Nichols says up to 8 different scenarios are in play covering Super Rugby and international matches. He says while several ideas are being tossed around, the return to play priorities for players are clear.
When rugby comes back, it should be part of society's or our culture's recovery from this, and it should be because it's the appropriate thing to do in terms of our country and our population and our fight against this pandemic. We don't want to be trying to take shortcuts or do something that's particularly special.
Potential pay cuts for provincial players are still to be confirmed, with Nichols saying there is some way to go in those discussions. For Checkpoint, Clay Wilson.
Lockdown has sent a few of you diving into the back of the pantry to whip up a meal from whatever you can dust off. And last night we were swamped with queries from you about how long cans of peaches or beans last, if it's safe to eat something that doesn't have an expiration date on it, and why you can't find a use-by date at all on Wattie's canned goodies. So we've gone to the top. Steve Thompson is the boss of Wattie's Food Safety and Quality. I asked him if I dug out my can of favourite black Doris plums, where would I find the expiry date?
There isn't an expiry date on the can. There's something called a Julian code, which is a series of numbers and letters. And what that does, that allows us to have complete traceability of that product. Lets us know when it was made, down to the minute, the date it was made, the product in it, what line it was made on. So for us, it contains all the traceability information that we need. From a date point of view, product that's in cans that has a shelf life of more than 2 years doesn't need a best before date or any date marking on it at all.
Okay, so just so we're clear on this, because man, have we had some queries about it. It's really had our listeners intrigued. There is no expiry or best before date on canned food because of the assumption that you've got a good 2 years before anything goes awry in the can.
Yeah, that's partially correct. So at the end of the day, they're considered to be fast-moving consumer goods. So people buy them, they use them. They're not expected to be kept for years and years. And the reason the code is not a secret in any way. It's just that the code that we put on allows us complete traceability. And if we were to put a best before date on, it gives us a problem in terms of it adds complexity and cost to the way we operate. But the main thing is it's just not needed because canned food is always safe to eat.
Always safe to eat, because there's a lot of pantry diving going on at the moment, Steve. People are fossicking around the back of the pantry looking to whip up a meal because they don't want to bother with the supermarket during COVID-19. So if they pull out a can, I've got a lovely array of your cans here, if they were to pull out a can of pasta sauce and they're looking at it thinking, is this okay to use or not? What's the guideline?
Well, let me give you a bit of a potted history of canned food, I suppose. So canned foods has been around a long time, a couple of 100 years. The British Navy are probably the first people who started supplying their sailors with canned food a couple of 100 years ago during the Napoleonic Wars. The process that is used for canning effectively eliminates all microorganisms in the can. So the product cannot actually spoil in a microbiological way. Once the lid is on, it's a sealed unit. You can't get anything in or out of it. And we heat process it, so we effectively pressure cook it. There's a lid on it. We cook the can at over 100 degrees mostly, and it basically sterilizes the contents. So the product inside the can is always going to be safe to eat as long as the can is not damaged or compromised in any way.
Right.
What will happen is that over time the product will deteriorate in quality. So if we take your Black Doris plums as an example.
Yeah.
So over time, what's going to happen is the colour of those plums is going to probably fade a little bit. They may look a bit greyer than the sort of a nice purple colour that from a can that you might buy that's only 6 months old. But the quality will deteriorate in terms of flavour and appearance, but it will always be safe to eat.
So these codes, because some people are aware of the codes at the bottom of the tin, and I understand you've been with Watties for more than a couple of decades. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been here for 24 years. Yeah.
So are you like a code whisperer? If I told you one of the codes off the bottom of the tin, would it ring any bells with you?
Probably.
Okay, so I've got a can of chili beans here, hot Watties chili beans, and I'll tell you what, it's a real test of the eyesight, but it's ZH3 217 1407R4. Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah. So I can tell when that product was made, what line it was made on. And the two initial letters tell me what product is actually in the can. If it didn't have a label and you hadn't told me what it was.
Oh, I'm going to put you to the test. Can I do that? Let me give you can you tell us how? Would you be able to give me a ballpark of how old that can of beans is that I just read out to you?
Yep. So that was made towards the end of 2017. Let
me ask you another one. And again, it depends on the light in the studio, I have to say. This can says RW 07790122122, and it looks like an S4. Does any of that ring a bell?
Again, as I said, I can tell you that was made towards the end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably made on line R4, which means it's probably a soup, or it could be a baked bean or spaghetti product. But that code, I can tell what it is if I look up that code RW, but I'm not unable to do that.
Let me just double check if I've got the R4 right, or is it an S4? What would it be if it was an S4?
No, F4 wouldn't make sense.
S for Sally. Does that?
Okay, so that means it's a seasonal product, so it'll be a fruit or a beetroot or corn or something.
Bingo! You just won the prize. My bad. I put you wrong. I didn't read the label properly.
Fine.
But you were exactly right. It is a light fruit salad, no added sugar. Hey,
yeah.
I'm imagining you're having a bit of a rush on at the moment with canned goods. Would that be fair?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we're very busy. Luckily we've just completed most of the seasonal processing, so all the corn and the fruit is in the can. We are still processing tomatoes and beetroot from a seasonal point of view, but also we're obviously busy making baked beans and spaghetti and soups and all of those other things as well. And obviously a lot of our product goes to Australia as well, so we're not just supplying New Zealand, we're also trying to supply Australia as well. So yes, it's definitely busier than it would normally be, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing for us. It keeps us busy, and if the factory's running flat out, it actually makes the factory run smoother. So it's good.
We really appreciate you taking time out to answer these questions for us, and it has solved a mystery, and our listeners will be very grateful.
Well, you're welcome.
And that was Steve Thompson of Watties. And finally tonight, a 99-year-old World War II veteran in Brazil has beaten the odds to become one of the oldest people to recover from COVID-19. Matthew Moore from Deutsche Welle reports.
At 99 years old, Armando Armelino Pavetta may have thought he'd seen his last guard of honour. The World War II veteran has waged many gruelling battles, but none as satisfying as this.
Winning this battle was for me bigger than winning the war.
Entering hospital at the end of March, Pavetta's chances of survival were slim. But doctors say it was his life in the military that helped him defeat the coronavirus in the end.
We were very apprehensive, waiting for a favourable sign, and he surprisingly recovered. I want to congratulate the medical team who helped me so much for looking out for my health. You're all great.
Pavetta shares this victory with the team of medics who treated him. Their triumph, a moment of hope in a dark chapter.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening. Socialising with friends in person still won't be allowed under Alert Level 3, which may come into effect next week. Auckland Grammar's headmaster Tim O'Connor says rules for schools under Level 3 are confusing and mean they're being used as a babysitting service. The New Zealand Rugby Union and the Players Association have agreed that 50% of the remaining players' spend for 2020 will be frozen. President Donald Trump says the US has passed the peak of new COVID-19 cases and predicted some states would reopen this month. And a 99-year-old British war veteran who's walking his garden for the National Health Service has raised more than $25 million. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.